Okay, welcome everybody to another episode of After the Tassel podcast. Today we have our special guest, Nick O'Neill, who is a 2013 graduate from Westminster with a Bachelor of Arts in Computer Science with an information technology emphasis. He's also earned 2 advanced degrees from Mizzou. Both were graduate certificates, one was a graduate certificate in organizational change. And he got his MBA from the Executive MBA program at the Trulaske College of Business, which I'm looking forward to hearing more about. So thank you for joining James and I today, Nick. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to tell our students. So why don't you tell us what you've been up to after the Tassel?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2013, spent some time working with a fellow alumni at Missouri Military Academy for a few years. And then I was a system administrator and security administrator at the University of Missouri. Spent some time at Shelter Insurance doing audit. At the same time, got my executive MBA, the graduate certificate in organizational change. And that's kind of what led me into cybersecurity. Is I realized that was the spot where you could make really good organizational change from an IT perspective, because you kind of have that driver, that risk behind it. So that's kind of what I've been up to since receiving my Tassel.
Sure. Well, and you said that was a pretty transformational and really unique experience at Trulaske. Can you tell us what led you to want to earn your executive MBA?
So I had looked at a couple different MBA programs. I looked at both. There's the Crosby and the Exec MBA are the 2 different styles that they have at the University of Missouri. One of my superiors had just finished her Crosby. It took her 5 years, and that's not really what I wanted to look for. So I decided to apply for the Executive MBA program. It wasn't really I'm not a typical, or at least I wasn't at the time, a typical fit for the program. They want you to have at least 10 years of experience in your field, I think it's 5 years. And they're looking for managers and executives. And at the time, I was just a sysadmin. But I applied. I talked a lot about at Westminster and, the leadership that I learned there and how important that was to me. And I got a response that said, you're not quite who we're looking for. So we're going to put you on the wait list for next year, but stick around. And then immediately after that, I got a call from the recruiter for that program. And she said, hey, nobody ever really makes it off the wait list. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put you in as the first admittance for next year. And that's when I had a year in between. So I stepped in and did the organizational change graduate certificate, which gave me a good prep for being back in college and, some of that leadership stuff. And then I, was admitted as the first admittance for the 2018 cohort, and the rest was kind of history. It was a fantastic program. I was in there with 30 other individuals. We were split up into small teams. We did an international residency where we visited Prague, Salzburg, and Munich.
Wow.
To the GE. One of the highlights from that is GE they used to have a research division out of Munich, and so we got to meet the primary researcher that was responsible for building the 787 Dreamliner, the jumbo jet that has the carbon fiber jet engines. Really cool to pick his brain for an hour. It was a truly transformational experience.
Was that your first time out of the country?
No, I had been to Germany. It was high school. I was trying to think what year, but we went for a short trip. I think it was two weeks. Toured a little bit, had a lot of fun, but it wasn't really academic in nature. It was more fun. You were going with a bunch of other high school students. So that was my first opportunity to deal with businesses and executives outside of the country, which is really neat.
That's really interesting. And did you know that it was a study abroad type of experience before you got in?
I did. So they went through the program is a 24-month program where you take 2 classes every 8 weeks. And then there's a summer residency. So you do an international trip over the summer, and there's a class that goes along with that.
That's cool.
So it was a very intense program, especially, it was built around working professionals, but it was also, built to test you, put you through your paces. So
no kidding. Well, let's get back to the beginning. When you were in high school and when you first hopped on to college here at Westminster, what led you to ultimately choose Westminster as your college?
So it's a really interesting story. I've got what did I say? Circuitous path.
Yes.
I'm a non-traditional student in the strictest sense. So I actually, graduating high school in 2005, I spent 2 years at Mizzou. Really wasn't happy. I went through, I had a double major in psychology and political science, and it just wasn't my thing. I'd spent 4 years on the debate team and the varsity debate team in high school, and I always wanted to go to law school. So that was my path. And the further I got down it, especially at Mizzou, it just wasn't the right fit for me.
Yeah.
So I left Mizzou, spent 3 years at a community college. I received 2 degrees from there. That's where I got into technology for the first time. And I ended up working at Hibbett Sporting Goods as the assistant manager. And then they had a store manager position open up in Fulton, Missouri, a place I'd never been to before. And I knew I wanted to finish my degree. So I was kind of excited. That's one of the reasons they had another couple spots open. And the reason that I chose the Fulton store was because I knew there were 2 colleges there. So when I arrived, I took a look around, and William Woods, their brochure just, it had IT specializations, but it was mostly horses. And so I just didn't feel like that was necessarily the right spot for me. And my girlfriend, who's now my wife, we went and visited Westminster College, and I fell in love with the campus. I met with Ed Morelli, who was the program chair, I think, at the time. I could be wrong about that, but he had a very, very unique way of teaching that really highlighted not only my leadership skills, but at the same time, he would force you to walk the path yourself, which in technology, that's kind of hard to do. It's very easy to get on the internet and look up a guide on how to do X, Y, and Z. But Ed Morelli forced you as a student to walk through that yourself without going through those steps. And it was just a really, really unique experience. And it kind of set me up for everything that happened, from then on. It forced me to look at my career in different ways. It's always caused me to take a step back. It's ultimately what led me into cybersecurity, because I was frustrated with being a sysadmin and not being able to enact the level of change that I thought we needed to do. So I ended up in cybersecurity. It's what led me to my executive MBA program, all the leadership that I've done since. Just a really, really incredible journey. And my wife and I were actually married at the church on campus. So,
which is a beautiful church.
It is fantastic.
It's a beautiful venue. I've been to a wedding there myself. It's just gorgeous. So you were talking about your career pathway being circuitous, and James and I were just talking before we hopped on the podcast how we try to emphasize that to our students, that it's not linear. You're going to take lots of side pathways. You might even take a step back or two and reevaluate your life. How did you, or I should say, what kind of advice would you give to students about what to expect once they graduate college?
So I think graduation is kind of a slap in the face, because you've put in so much work, you've got this degree, and you feel like, man, I have made it. I have done it, and I am ready to take on the world. And the truth is, everybody that you're going to interact with probably made the same journey. So you're just at the beginning of their journey.
Yeah.
And so it can be difficult, because you come out full bore, ready to make all that change and do all the things that you want to do. And there is a level of paying your dues that does have to happen.
Yeah.
The alternative to that is kind of, you do know what you know, and hang on to that, hang on to the things that you've done and the things that you've learned in college, and apply those, and then keep learning. That's the other big thing, is definitely find a way to get into something, whether it's, your career path, or, we've got so many IT professionals that come from diverse backgrounds. And, me, like, I went through the bachelor's in IT and I ended up more moving into management. I have friends that, one of them has an art degree and he's in IT. So there's no linear path, just exactly what you were saying. Your degree is just a stepping stone into your future. So hang on to that knowledge, but definitely keep increasing that knowledge. And if you feel like you're not getting, or you're not in the right spot, I've moved around quite a bit, and that's pretty typical in tech careers. But I think it's just as important, no matter where you're at, to make sure that if you're not, you can feel it in your gut, right? Is that this is not the right spot for me. And if you're feeling that, don't be afraid to move on. Don't hold into something because you think that you've got that sunk cost fallacy. Find the right spot, find the right niche for you. One of the things that I have been really big into is workflow development, Six Sigma, Toyota kind of things. Those are my bread and butter now. And that's not anything that necessarily I picked up anywhere along the way. It was just something that I got really excited about.
Interesting. I like the idea of flow development, and I'm sure that you get that from the organizational change certificate that you earned.
Yeah. So there's a book called The Phoenix Project that pulls from another book from the 1980s that was called The Goal. And it applies a lot of, like, Toyota Kata is more of a manufacturing principle. And it applies those same kind of perspectives to IT in a very, very specific way. And the books are really easy to read. They're fables. So it's not, it's not like you're reading a textbook. You're reading characters, and it's cheesy at times, but it gets the idea across. And the idea is, if you set up something to be successful from the start, and you handle that workflow, you can get so much more done. You can be so much more effective.
Gotcha. Well, one thing we wanted to ask you about, because you've talked about the circuitous career and, kind of unsure about some paths in your life. How have you approached setbacks in your life or career? How have you dealt with that change in your life since you've graduated?
Definitely. So the nice thing is, I've really been fortunate enough in my life to deal with issues that most people never have the chance to struggle through. And if there's one thing that's taught me, it's that it can always get worse. No matter where you are at in that process, it's always a step lower. And it sounds morbid, but you can approach issues with the worst possible outcome in mind. And I think that that's where everybody needs to start. Because if you accept that scenario and you recognize, you know what, yes, that is bad, but I can immediately see, hey, there's steps that I can take to get out of that, or, life's not going to end. If you accept that scenario, then you know that eventually you can get out, and it takes the fear out of everything else that happens in between. So if you already know where the worst is and you already know where the best is, it makes it so much easier to accept all those different approaches. And then you can approach your current situation with a clear head and really start building that path into, where you want to be. Where's your ideal situation?
When we had our previous podcast we recorded today, we spoke about a very similar topic, and just that fear of failure, and even being scared enough to not even get to that point. So a lot of people, and some students graduating, and starting out their career, they don't even get to the point that they're able to kind of endure those situations. So I'm 100% with you with again, just being able to kind of be aware of what the worst scenario is, and then being able to find the solutions for there too, and being able to kind of help yourself in those struggles and those career issues as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going forward about being in your career now, maybe previous careers, or even considering your career going forward, how do you recommend students advocate for themselves? Because we know sometimes it's hard we don't have that confidence. These younger students, coming out of college, they might not have the acumen or the confidence to speak up for themselves. But how would you recommend a young professional advocate for themselves?
So the term advocate is difficult because it almost makes you adversarial, right? It immediately puts you me versus them, and that's not where you want to be.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that there's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. First, there is no straight path, right? If whatever you're trying to accomplish was easy, then wherever you're at would have already done those things. Everybody would have already done those things.
Yeah.
So, keep learning, keep growing. And the biggest thing is you want to, instead of advocating or instead of being adversarial, you want to find people that are of like mind. You want to help others, keep that knowledge growing and help others keep their knowledge growing as well. And what that does is you're not advocating at that point. It's not you and I, it's us. So don't be afraid to build that group. And the second part, I like the term, you do you, boo, right? So don't be afraid to do you. At the end of the day, a large part of being successful is always dependent on the right situation. So just like I talked about before, if you're not in the right situation, sometimes that means that you need to step away from the problem. Sometimes you also need to have patience, and that's something that it's a decision that you are the only one that can make. So you have to make that decision. You have to stick with it. But like I said, don't get caught up in that sunk cost fallacy. Don't get caught up in the fact that I've already put so much time into this that it's painful to walk away, because sometimes all you need is that fresh start to get going again.
Yeah. I love what you say, about it's not a you issue or it's an us issue. And, I look at James and he and I just make a really good team. And, we have to learn how to lift each other up in the workplace, in the workforce. And, you find your mentors, you find your work people, and you can't go in with the mindset of competition. We're a team. And, that's why I enjoy, working with James, is that, he gets it. And I think we both come together and we have the same mindset about serving the student. And I think you have to have that in the workplace, or else you just can't get your job done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nick, I kind of want to go back a little bit with your current career in cybersecurity. That's been to me one of the most interesting fields to learn about with starting at Westminster. I have a background with working with people in their careers, and I felt with coming here, it's been really interesting because I feel it's extremely unique field, and the path for people to get there, I'm still learning on better ways and clear ways to do that. So I was curious, can you go into a little more detail about kind of the experience you had with that, and any feedback for people that are wanting to get to that field and how they can better network too?
Yeah.
So the number one thing that I always tell people when you're looking at cybersecurity, it's such a broad field. I mean, you can literally come from anywhere. There's, I'm more into the policy side of things. So that's where when I was talking earlier about that circuitous route, I wanted to go to law, and I ended up in boardrooms working with executives and lawyers all day. building policy that makes everybody more secure, because that's the path that made sense for me. There's plenty of very, very highly technical, security researchers that's all they do all day is they write code and they attack things. There's people that all they do all day is secure the opposite of that, right? There's a whole different section of cybersecurity called open source intelligence, where it's more about finding information and locating people that maybe people can't locate. So whether it's bounty hunting or whatever, there's so many options. There's security awareness. If you're a media kind of person, you want to I build posters. That's something that I never thought I would do, because I don't see myself as that kind of creative person. But the other thing that I do want to mention is, you talked about networking with people in your field, and whether it's cybersecurity or whether it's anything else, I hate the term networking. The thing is, it's kind of like that advocate situation. It puts you in the mindset that professionals are some kind of currency. Go to a networking thing and make as many contacts as you can. I've found, and what I prefer is that you go out and meet people, you keep an open mind, but be yourself and be genuine. If you are, then your network's going to grow naturally, and you'll develop those real friendships with people that actually want to see you succeed, as opposed to, I know so-and-so, I added him on LinkedIn. He might see my post every once in a while, but he's not really going to step out of his way to come help me, and I'm not going to do the same. That doesn't help anybody. You want to make sure that you invest in others, and in turn, if you're genuine about it, they'll invest in you. That's what real wealth is.
Yeah. It's all about developing relationships. I know in the past we've told students, because myself, I'm an introvert, but you're building relationships when you're standing in line at the grocery store, at the bank, working with your stylist, your hairdresser, or your barber, whoever. But the more you talk and get to know somebody, and the more genuine you are, I totally agree with you there. You're just naturally gonna deepen and strengthen those relationships, and you're going to pay it forward, and eventually that will come back around to you, and blessings will spring forth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, without letting you go, because I know we're wrapping up here in a few minutes, but we're celebrating Alumni Weekend. This is the first time we've had it in 2 years now because of COVID. But you were on the Alumni Council, but we wanted to ask you, what experiences led you to want to give back to Westminster and become more engaged as an alum on the council?
Yeah, so I want to say I joined the council in 2017. So I'm coming up, I think we're allowed to serve 6 years before we have to take a break. And the thing that brought me back, and the thing that keeps bringing me back every year, is, everybody knows that Westminster's had a lot of, but for me, it was always a place of transformation. And the people that I've talked to, the alumni over the years, it was a place of transformation for them as well. So there's something about this campus and the history that's taken place here. This is where I found my passion with Ed Morelli's eccentric and sometimes esoteric way of teaching. But it's what led me to everything that I love about my life. It's where I married my wife. My biggest thing about giving back is, if you went to Westminster and it changed the way that you see yourself and your career, bring that back. Help future generations know Westminster as the place where you can continue to grow and change.
Perfect. Perfectly said, and a great way to wrap up the podcast, because that's why we want to invite the alums back, or other professionals back, is to give back by offering advice and words of counsel, and to let our student listeners know that they're not in it alone. The feelings that they're experiencing are probably not the first feelings our graduates have gone through. You guys were just as nervous as they were. Probably a
Absolutely
situation, what am I going to do with my life? Or, I'm ready to change the world. And then poof, you
The
know,
world hits back.
whoops, no. Back. So we really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your time with us on this podcast. We'd love to meet you in person. So again, thank you for sharing your time with us. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
I'll be there this weekend. I hope to see everybody else as well.